Right. So we're going to start. I'll get Belle to start the formalities.
Wait, I need to spotlight myself. Hold on. Hi guys. Nice to meet you. I'm just gonna open up the presentation, and then I'm gonna start from there. One second. Can everyone see my PowerPoint?
Yes.
Yep. And before I start, can I ask everyone to maybe mute yourself because we are gonna be recording this session for the people who can't make it today. Yeah. So welcome to Doggedge Pitch 2023. We are very thrilled to have you join us as the finalists. Congratulations. And today we're going to be driving to our first workshop, which is discovering the fundamentals. And I'm going to move on to our guest speakers today, which is Courtney Mayhew and Claire Aguilar, if I pronounce it correctly. And yeah, after this, I'm gonna be introducing Alex and our guest speakers properly. But before that, I'm gonna jump into this year's projects from New Zealand. We've got 10 projects altogether. I'm very excited. And this is the international projects this year. I'm sure you guys will be able to get to talk to each other in very near future. I'm going to be making a big group chat. So if you guys want to connect to each other, then feel free to. Um, and then today's topic is going to cover four things. It's going to be about our pitch process, what decision makers are looking for in a pitch deck, and budgeting. And I'll email you later about the details of the next week's workshops, but here are the dates and time. And yeah, I'm gonna be passing the mic back to Alex. Let me just, how do I stop sharing? There we go. Yep, return Alex. Oh, you're muted.
Tihe mauri ora. I ngā mana, i ngā reo, i rā rangatira mā, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Nā mai hari mai ki te whare o Doc Edge. Ko mangawhai te maunga, ko tamaki te awa, no ahia ahau, te tiriti o Waitangi toku waka, ko Alex Lee ahau. That was our my mihi to all of you. As we gather today, it's necessary for me to pay respects to the people of my ancestral lands as well as the land that I have now come to. I'm really proud to be able to stand before you as a member of the Doc Edge family, and very excited to welcome all of you to Doc Edge Pitch. You are now part of our Doc Edge Pitch whānau. For those of you who are not from New Zealand, the word whānau means that you're part of our family, and we'll always look after you from now on. You're part. We are invested in everything that you do. We want to make sure that you're going to make the best project possible. I think it's an ideal situation right now and timing for me to introduce to you our two guests. And then we'll go into it. We're really excited today because we've managed to snare two really interesting and experienced people that will help us in our journey to ensure that we can make the best projects that can get seen and get picked up. The first person is Courtney Mayhew. So Courtney has worked in film and television for over 15 years in Australia, out here in New Zealand and abroad. Hi, Courtney. Um, at the end of 2022, she stepped into helming a new distribution entity, Ahi Films, as managing director across Australia and New Zealand. And I'm so excited that we do have this new distribution entity because I think that New Zealand, Australia needs to have some new thinking and some new perspectives on distribution. And for those of you who are also may not be familiar with Ahi Films, Ahi Films also is working with Chelsea Winstanley, who's behind Ahi Films. Courtney has worked in-house across marketing and publicity for studios, including Paramount Pictures and Studio Canal, and was previously communications director at Nixco in Australia. She has a communications agency called Matter that's operating across entertainment. Along with her release experience, Courtney has over 35 film and television credits under her belt. She worked as a unit publicist and behind the scenes EPK producer. She's one of the founders of the inaugural In the Shade Summer Film Festival in 2022 in New Zealand, was program and communication consultant for the Power of Inclusion Summit in 2019, the largest event of its kind in the Asia Pacific region, and has produced music videos and a documentary. So welcome, Courtney. And as mentioned, we have Claire Aguilar. Claire is a documentary film producer and film consulting, providing analysis and strategic planning for independent producers. Hi, Claire. Um, oh, yeah, she has served as a film curator, film festival director, a public television commissioning editor, and broadcaster. She worked at the International Documentary Association as the director of programming, mounting the documentary conference at Sheffield Doc. Claire was the former director of programming at Sheffield DocFest, UK's leading festival for documentary and digital media. And she also worked at ITVS as the vice president of programming, commissioning content and directing editorial strategy for the organization, helping over 200 films for international producers and filmmakers. The second generation Filipina American, Claire is a member of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, serving on the Academy's Executive Documentary Branch Committee, and she serves on the boards of Women Make Movies, Firelight Media, and the Y Foundation. So kia ora, Claire. So thank you so much for both of you to being here. And I think that we'll start off by immediately launching into a conversation. Look, all of you are here today wanting to be part of Doc Edge Pitch, and we recognize that it's going to be for some of you a new experience, and some of you who are experienced in pitching, it's really good to be able to revisit some of the fundamentals and principles of pitching. But first of all, maybe we can start off by talking about what the pitch process is. Those of you who've done pitching before will be aware of it, but those of you who haven't, a pitch process is an opportunity for you to hone in your project, to be able to present it to a panel of decision makers. Decision makers will comprise of people that are funders, people that are sales agents, distributors, people that work in the area of philanthropy and other forms of funding, people that potentially might be able to assist as an executive producer or a co-producer, and certainly people that might also be working in the area of impact and trying to figure out how you can actually create more outreach. When you are pitching, the most important thing is that you must remember that no one is there with the intent of putting you down or making it difficult for you. We're all here with one purpose. We're all here to help you make the best film possible and to be able to share our knowledge. So, while sometimes you might find that you might have pitched it and it may not be quite ready, or maybe it may not be exactly what a particular commissioner or a decision maker may be looking for, they'll still be there to give you advice and to be able to help you through the process. So it's really important to go into a pitch process with an open mind and with open heart, because that's what the decision makers will be bringing into the process. So to start off with, maybe I will start by asking Claire. Claire, in your roles, in the different roles that you've been in, what would you say is the reason, or what do you think that a pitch process should represent for a filmmaker?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Well, first of all, thanks so much for the invitation to do this, Alex. And also, it's great to meet all of you, Belle, Courtney, and also the pitchers for this process. And just to introduce myself, that I just want to give a land acknowledgement to the place where I'm coming from, which is California in the U.S., which is the land of the Tongva indigenous people. And we're very grateful to conduct our business in this land where the great community of Tongva people have laid a legacy in California. So, and back to your question. So what is the pitch process? What's the important thing for filmmakers for the pitch process? I think one of the things I like in a pitch too is it's a way to start relationships. You know, the pitch process began as a business proposition, right? Where companies would be able to, basically it was a market kind of a strategy to be able to get basically to buy things for revenue, for deals. And then it kind of got developed for the movie industry. And then lastly for documentary, but for documentary, it's kind of different because we're not necessarily in it for a quick deal. For documentary, it's a long process. It's about relationship, because I think to get your project off the ground in documentary, you need a lot of different partners. You need a lot of relationships. And it's a way to start the relationships, whether it's just an elevator pitch, you meet somebody in an elevator or in a taxi and you tell them what the project is, or if it's a formal pitch like the Doc Edge pitch that you're going to do. So it's the beginning of that relationship, so you're able to get the support, the relationship you need, and the people to invest in your project and get it done, hopefully sooner rather than later, and to the best of your ability, as you say.
Thank you. And maybe we can go to Courtney. So Courtney, when you're involved or you've been invited to a pitch, or perhaps filmmakers come and see you in an office or even in an elevator and they're pitching to you, I mean, what would you describe as the intent, or what it is that filmmakers should be trying to do when they first talk to you?
Tēnā koutou katoa. Just a little mihi from me, ko Courtney Mayhew toko ingoa, ko Ngāti Pākehā ahu, he tangata tiriti no Airangi o ko tupuna, no te whanganui atara aho, ke te noho o ki Tamaki Makaurau. So I'm residing here in good old Auckland. It's really nice to meet you all today. And thank you very much, Alex, for the invite. And Claire, really lovely to meet you too, and listen to your mahi and all that awesome work that you've been doing. Just a kind of tautoko what Claire said about relationships. And you immediately, because it becomes quite a long, enduring one when it comes to a distributor like us and a filmmaker, you do want to know that that person's going to be on the same vibe as you go along. And especially when it comes to a documentary, because as we know, documentaries will sometimes take a little bit longer. They'll change direction. Things will come up that weren't anticipated, and everyone needs to be on the same wavelength with that. In terms of someone, if I was to meet someone, and I have had this happen before, like literally in an Uber, or when it was like a waiter at a restaurant the other day, whose hustle I severely admired, because first of all, he complimented me on my fit and told me he loved what I was wearing, and then goes, "What industry are you in?" I was like, "Oh, I work in film," and he's like, "Oh, I'm a filmmaker," and I was like, "Here we go." And like, hat tip to the bro, I asked him, I said, "What are you doing?" And he gave me he quickly said something, and then he goes, "But I'm going to leave you to your meal and your drinks and stuff." He went away. He came back and he gave me a piece of paper, which were the key points of what he'd told me, and a little cute drawing in the corner with his email address. It was brief, but it was impactful. And I think that's the key thing, is that if you're going to have like a minute with someone, how can you be impactful and kind of stick in their mind longer than someone else? So it's really honing into what your core unique selling proposition is of your project, and focusing on that, and then potentially just doing, like, it's just also just about that relationship and just getting on their level, on their vibe, and reading the room and reading how they are.
Belle, just make sure that we just keep Claire and Courtney as the main spotlights, and I can just speak. So we can just have a conversation between the three of us.
Yeah,
So
cool.
you know, so that at some point in time, if we are talking and you wanted to add to it, then please do. I do agree. I think that is all about creating something that's memorable. Someone's mic is playing up. It's all about creating something memorable, because you want to create an impression, and you want to create an opportunity for people to be able to connect with you on a personal level, because it's all about relationship building. I mean, I've been doing this for the last 18 years of my life, and every year it's really great to be able to go to a market, to be able to go to some industry event, and to be able to see people because those relationships are enduring. And I'm sure that both of you will agree. It's like, you meet someone, you get to know the person. Next time you go to another market, that person sees you, they introduce you to someone else that you should know, or maybe it'll be worth you knowing. And it's that whole thing about being able to create those relationships, allow you to deepen your connections, and to be able to talk to people about your projects. If you were to so what is in a pitch process, Claire, what would be what are the things that you feel that a filmmaker needs to get through to you? And you can talk about it as an informal pitch. You can talk about it also as a formal pitch.
Yeah. Sorry, it feels echoey to me. Sorry if I keep checking if my volume is good. I mean, you know him as well, Alex, a great mentor who was a commissioning editor named Nick Fraser from the UK, and you probably know him too, Courtney. But he was a great commissioning editor. He had these 3 points called the whys, the WHYs, the 3 whys of a pitch. First is why this pitch, why this project. The second why was why you. Why are you making this film? And the third was why now? Why is it important to see this film now? And he said, if you could answer those questions, whether it's an elevator pitch of a minute or whether it's a formal pitch of 7 minutes, why is this, what is the content of the film? Why is it you making the film? What kind of investment do you have in the film? And also, why is it important for people to see this film now as opposed to back then? Or is it unique? Is it singular? Is it important? Why is your voice the voice to tell this film? If you could answer those questions and make it really intriguing, I always give the kind of a kind of lame example of myself. If I were a filmmaker and I was making a film about the brown bears of California, it's like, well, why do we need to see a film about the brown bears? Because they're being extinct, and there used to be thousands of them, and now there are only 18. I'm making up these numbers, but you see the point. Why is it important that you make them? Because as a child, I went to the national parks. I saw them all. They were beautiful and furry, and now they're kind of tatty and they're disappearing. And also, why now? Because they're on the verge of disappearing. So if you get those 3 points, that's really good. But I kind of like what Courtney was saying in terms of the creativity of the pitch, because usually we get pitches that are just, and I understand how intimidating it is to have to pitch somebody. You are a pitcher, and I've been on the receiving end all the time, the pitchee. It's relatively easy for me to sit back and have all these softballs hurled at me, although it does get tiring. But I know for producers, for filmmakers, to have to pitch, really literally pitch so much, it's exhausting, it's intimidating, and I can sense the fear. But I think one thing to remember if you're a producer is that the people on the other end, meaning like Courtney and I or Alex, like we need the producer and the content as much as you need them. It's really an exchange. So, forget the power dynamics, because that can be something that'll hinder your pitch. But think about, I'm going to engage in this relationship. If it's a fit, it could be good for both of us, not only for you.
Thanks, Claire. I mean, Courtney, if someone were to pitch to you right now, what do you think their opening line should be, and what should they try to get through to you so you don't turn off straight away?
Well, actually, kind of what Claire was saying, her sort of last point of the first, of the three things, which is really helpful to think about when you're pitching. The last point sort of delves into audience, which is really important because it's like, why now? And we're at a time where our eyeballs have never been in such a competitive environment for attention, for when it comes to content in general. I hate calling films content, by the way, but I'm just saying, like, because there is a lot of other content that is in an audio visual sense that we are now up against as film distributors and as filmmakers, that we didn't used to be up against before. So for me, it'd be hard to say what the first sentence is, but one of the key things that it always stands out, because it is actually quite rare, is when a producer or a filmmaker has actually thought about the audience. They've actually thought about who is going to watch this. I adore when someone makes something for themselves, but they also need to have an awareness that in order for them to continue making movies, in order for us to have a great sort of fruitful partnership, we've got to also know that we can find that audience, because nothing breaks my heart more than someone putting their heart and soul into something and then no one watches it. So I think it's in those first few sort of moments, if they don't the absolute core thing is the concept, right? It's what you are, it's what you're actually making, it is the story, because that's always going to be the most important thing off the bat. But then if you're also telling me who you think the audience is, or you want to talk about who the audience is and where those eyeballs are going to be, then that's also really enticing. Because it's just so important, more so than it ever has been. And that's because that's a sort of a core principle at AHI for us, is constantly thinking about that, because we're not in the position where I used to, years ago, we'd release and you'd release a film always in cinemas, and it would be on the Thursday, and let's say that it wasn't a great film, you could fluff that up and do sort of marketing around it, and you could do you could get away with tricking the audience, because one, social media didn't exist, which meant that no one found out that the film wasn't that great until the Monday when they all went back to work or they went back to school or those sorts of things. You had time. But we're in a now economy, and so it's really about knowing your audience and getting them on board from the absolute get-go.
Thank you. The second answer that Claire had, the second question was, why you? I think that's a really important question, because we need to know why you're the best person to tell the story. We need to know why you're passionate about the story, because there can be so many people out there with a similar idea, but not necessarily the best suited for that particular story. Could you, Claire, talk a little bit about how they can demonstrate to you that they are potentially the best suited, or perhaps someone that should be telling the story?
Yes. So, there's so many different ways that producers can say, not only me, but it's my voice is important in the story. My voice is something that is needed in this story, and we see this with so many different communities. Especially now, like for me, I'm Asian American, and before 20 years ago, there weren't a lot of films about Asian Americans, or they were being told by non-Asian Americans. And so when there were the first documentaries came out by Asian Americans, it was really important to say, this comes from the community. This comes from that voice. On the other hand, there are a lot of naysayers who were saying, but these filmmakers, these Asian American filmmakers, don't have experience being filmmakers. So we'd rather have, let's say, a Ken Burns, who is the big, kind of PBS white male producer, tell our story. But it's changed now. And I think one thing producers can do is talk about, how they're related to the story personally, and whether that's through their community or whether that's through their personal experience. It's always great for me to know what the connection is. You know, why should I see a film about I don't know, let's say, you know, the little fish in the Baja California that's endangered, or about Barbie dolls and who invented them. It's like, what is the motivation for that? And conversely, me as an audience member, how can you convince me of the value of that? Or can I have some personal connection to that? You know, who knows? Maybe I played with Barbie dolls when I was younger, or I have some connection. So I think it's good to be able to see what the filmmaker's connection is with the story that way, and how they're related to it. I mean, I think it's hard to tell, like, well, who's the best person to tell this story, whether it's a resume or their experience. I think the proof of the pudding is in the film, because I think that, you know, you have a kind of nose when things are authentic or not, you know. I mean, I think that it's a question of creativity, but also, do I feel that this is authentic? And I think audiences have a sense of that authenticity.
Yes. And I wondered, Courtney, from your point of view, I mean, the issue of authenticity is really important these days, because we want to make sure that people are able to tell the stories and they're the best suited to tell the stories. Do you have any insights about, you know, how you view the issue of authenticity, and how a filmmaker can demonstrate that to you? Because obviously you want to make sure that you are picking up a film that is going to be a film that is representative of the community, or at least authentic to the voice of the subjects that need to be in the story.
It's such a exciting time when it comes to this authentic filmmaking and story sovereignty. And it's obviously a very complex one that I think a lot of people are still working out. You know, and it's different between, say, a narrative feature as well and a documentary feature, the considerations that we would make at an AHI level. You know, there was a certain story that was a narrative that came to me the other day, and it had all the best intentions. I knew it did, but the particular issue they were tackling, it didn't sit comfortably with me that they were the ones who would be telling this story. It was a very specific story to a specific community, and on a narrative level, no one from that community actually had agency over the project. And there was a consultant that was brought on board far after it had been conceptualized, and I've had bad experiences with people who are just advising or consultants as opposed to actively being involved from the inception. And again, I'm saying this was very particular to this project, and it depends on project to project. You know, talking a little bit about AHI and the kaupapa of it, you know, as Alex mentioned, someone behind it is Chelsea Winstanley. You know, as a Māori woman, she obviously has certain values that I am definitely aligned with, and that everyone else, there's a lot of other people behind the AHI as well, including myself and her, who've all worked in the industry for a while. And we all come from different communities that we connect with, but we're all very aligned in that we would like to increase the representation to a much more equitable, fair level in film. Though I will say at the same time, that's not the only films that we're taking on at all. But we're also, because we're kind of thinking about it in terms of, we should all just be doing this. We shouldn't be saying, hey, like, for us, we're not just saying, hey, we're here just for underrepresented filmmakers. We're just going to do it. We're just going to be trying to be representational completely across the board. And the other thing to take into account is communities are not homogenous. You know, and that is really important. And I think that, kind of going back to that that issue that I had with the previous project, was that the person that they got on board was this one person, and they thought they'd covered off the community with this one person. And it was actually a community that I've done work with before, so I knew that personally, I knew that view was one of many. And I think we can get into a really dangerous spot when we put it on the shoulders of just the one person. You know, I've had arguments with my fellow queer friends around what we're personally comfortable with. I'm going to say that as a queer woman, I never want to live in a world where Cate Blanchett is not allowed to play a lesbian. Very happy with that. She can continue doing that. But I have friends who have different opinions, and that's always going to happen. And so that's why it's so tricky for everyone to navigate. But I think authenticity, you know, Claire sort of touched on this, audiences can smell it. They can smell it when it's not. And the most successful films, whether it is narrative or documentary, come from a really authentic place. In a documentary sense, when it is someone as an observer and telling the story of another community, it can sort of change. Sometimes that's a really interesting observational point. They just have to be very, very sensitive to that, because I don't think that outsiders shouldn't be able to tell stories of certain communities. They just have to do it with the right intention and do the right steps for whatever that community is expecting of them. We distributed just theatrically in New Zealand the Territory, which is about the Uruawawa tribe in Brazil, and that in that case it was very much a co-production between the community there, 50-50 profit split between the filmmakers and them. They ended up becoming the filmmakers, some of them as well, and DPs that were accredited on the project. The director was a white American, but he had all the best intentions. He did all the right steps, and he made a really beautiful movie that you would hate. I would hate the idea that wouldn't stop because of just his involvement, you know, because everything else was really beautiful in the way it was held and the kaupapa and the partnerships on that film. So again, it's case by case basis. And I think we are getting to a point where it's easier to figure out. It's easier within the industry to go, okay, that's probably not right. That's probably right. Those sorts of things. It's been a real learning process in the last 10 years around story sovereignty. And as I said, I think a really exciting one.
It can be the white elephant in the room. So do you think that when a particular filmmaker is pitching a project, that it's worth that they make sure that they cover it off immediately in their pitch, at least rather than to sort of, oh, well, you know, they can work it out, just kind of like talk about it straight away and say why or what it is that people may have concerns about? Because obviously, as you say, you know, someone who may be a straight man trying to tell a story about a queer woman, you know, there's obviously that immediate question that they're going to have is like, do you know? Do you have a connection? Are you consulting with the right people? Are you authentic? So I, you know, in my world, when I talk to filmmakers, I always say lay it out on the line at the very beginning, you know, so that it's not a question that is residual, that's lingering on. Do you agree with that?
100%. Do you, Claire?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's best to be open and frank about it, and you know, I think that it's okay to say, well, you know, I'm working this out, but I'm taking the steps. And I think, you know, your example of the Territory, Courtney, it's interesting because the filmmaker really did his homework, you know, not only about the tribe and the weird, you know, environmental, ecological, political complication of this situation in the Territory, but also, you know, what kind of collaboration did he want to have, you know, where the tribe becomes the filmmaker, they become producers, and what kind of financial sharing do they have? And I think that makes a big difference. And maybe they knew this along the way during the process, right? But not at the beginning, but at least to acknowledge that these were hairy issues. I think at the beginning, instead of getting kind of blindsided by it, which would happen quite a lot, you know, at least 10 years ago. As you say, it's getting more complex right now, but I think it's best to be head on about it.
Yeah, and not. I think it's so true about like sort of saying, hey, I still haven't figured it out yet, but this is something that is front of mind, and I want to get, you know, we want to figure it out, is really important. Because and if you are talking to a distributor like myself, I mean, this is from a very AHI standpoint, we're really wanting to become partners with people, you know, from the moment that they are coming on board with us. We're not just signing an MG and then them coming back to us when they've finished the film. So the earlier they come to us and we can have that meaningful input with them and really help them and work with them on their project, the better.
Yes.
Mhm.
So taking it one step backwards, if someone had an idea for a film and is working on a particular project, how early or how advanced should they be before they start thinking about pitching? What's your advice in terms of timing?
So I think, it's sometimes I have had people come to me far too early, and they haven't thought of all these questions yet, and that unfortunately in my mind will sour the project because I've gone, they haven't actually, are they going to get there? Are they going to do their due diligence? I think that when it comes to it's really about saying, especially with a documentary, this is the kind of tone that we're aiming for. This is there was someone recently that literally sent me a promo of the kind of tone that they wanted, and I immediately, that's all they've sent me, and I went, all right, now I feel what, because it was about a very famous person, and so you could have taken who's got many different facets, and you could have taken it anywhere. But what they sent me made me go, all right, I know which track you're going to go down in a creative spin. And I know things will change because you haven't started the documentary yet. But it was just like once they definitely know the tone, that's when I'm kind of happy to have a conversation with someone in a documentary sense. Yeah.
Claire, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, for me, I think that it's important to know, or for the filmmaker to communicate what stage they're in the documentary process. I mean, if the difference between a concept stage and a developmental stage is vast, right? So if you could say it's just an idea, I just have a situation, or I want to explore a certain subject area. I don't really have characters yet. I'm not quite sure if it's going to be a narrative documentary or what kind of story, but I'm just exploring, as opposed to I have a log line, or I have a character, I have some TV footage of this character, although I haven't shot, and just be as precise as possible, and also leave yourself an opening, Whereas if you've shot for 2 years and you're still trying to work out the footage and you don't have an assembly, then I would think, well, I'd like to see something,
Yeah.
if you have something. But I think being upfront about, well, where are you really, and just admitting that it's just an idea stage and I'm open to suggestions is much better than saying I have it all locked up and this is what the film is going to be, because, there's room for creativity.
Courtney, you mentioned earlier that you had met this particular guy and he gave you something that you could take away. That was a summary of some of the points that he had raised. If someone were to present you something that is in a written form, and the same question is applicable to you, Claire. If someone provides you a pitch deck or something that's a summarized version of what it is that they're proposing, what are the main things you would like to see in that piece of paper?
I hate to say this, but brevity is always better than an incredibly long document. And that is just purely because of being quite time poor at our end and the amount of things that we receive. But also it does sometimes, if something's really rambly, I do kind of think, they're not quite succinct in what they're going for. So being really, really clear. Of course, something that's visually enticing is going to be something we're going to want to read at our end, as opposed to something that's more dull. Pitch decks are an interesting one, because I've seen quite a few at this point, and the ones that definitely stand out to me are the ones that have been visually interesting in some way, that have had, they've put effort into the visual presentation. Because if they're putting effort into the visual presentation of that, it does make me go, oh, you're putting effort into this overall. How important this is. And then as well, what was interesting, there was actually something that came to me recently that was for Australia and New Zealand distribution, and they said they were going to go to sales agents with it, and it placed too much assumption on the reader knowing the context of Australia and New Zealand. Well, as it was actually New Zealand, so it assumed knowledge of the reader. So it assumed that the reader knew about the subject they were talking about. And I was like, I do, but I know there's going to be a lot of sales agents that you send this to that you have a conversation with that won't, and you actually need to put that context in. I think when you become so close to a subject, you forget that not everyone has that even basic knowledge. So that real basic knowledge is really, really important to have in there, even if it feels it feels like it's too obvious. I think that's important. And then there's another thing that comes into it, especially in Australia and New Zealand, because of the way our funding structure is and the things you have to provide is comps. So films that you're comparing it to, really think about that. The reason that on a theatrical level people look at comps is because they comp it against the box office. And so there was a recent one where this person, all the comps that they gave were IP-driven major studio feature films. I understood that they were trying to tell me it was a tone thing, but they had the box office numbers at below. And that said to me, oh, you're being really unrealistic about what your film is. And you potentially aren't as experienced as you think you are. If you think with the resources that you currently have, you'd be able to make something that's as big as King Kong. So I think comps are really important, but really saying why you're putting those comps in there. Is it for tonal, reasons? Is it if it's just cinematography? Be really specific, and then if you want to bring in the box office side of things, bring that in as well. But just when you put your competitive, like your, similar films in, just be really specific about how they're informing your project and how they're similar to your project. Because unfortunately, we do live in a world still where things, a lot of creative films will get analyzed against previous films, because that is what we have to go on. We try and not put too much onus on it too heavily at AHI, like a few other distributors I think do, but it is an important thing to get across to someone that, what you're aiming for and what your film could be.
Claire, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think that covers it really well. I come from the kind of old school world of when I worked at ITVS, I would read these 6-page treatments, without any visual support, and they would just go on and on and on, and they're basically a humanities paper, or a thesis. And then suddenly now we're in the land of the pitch deck, where sometimes it's all visual and there's hardly any copy at all. There's no text. And it's like, well, what is this about? I have a lot of faces. And so I think that it's kind of come full circle, but it'd be great if it did have the information, but also was visually exciting and also gave a sense of the film. I think, the proof of the pudding always to me is to look at a video sample, and if they can include that in their pitch deck, it really helps a lot. It's great to see images, but I think that also gives you a sense of the tone of the film and what the feel is. Even though comps kind of work, and in the industry it's really important, I think when you can see any kind of footage from the filmmaker and see the talent there or how they're able to use image and sound together, it just works a lot. So I think Courtney covered a lot of it really well, but I do feel like I'm kind of in the middle of this, like, oh my God, another pitch deck, and it's very, it's a little overwhelming. There's so much to go through. On the other hand, I don't miss those days of the treatments that would go on and on and on and on. Those days are over, I hope.
Yeah, thanks for that. Guys, I just wanted to let you know that Courtney is going to be leaving soon. So what I would like to do is that maybe we'll spend the next 10 minutes just fielding some questions as to where we are right now. And then we'll take a break, and then we'll come back. And I'm hoping that Claire will still be able to stay on, because it'll be nice to have more conversation about the pitch process itself. So at this point in time, if anyone's got a question, you can raise your hand so that Belle can put you on. Don't be shy. while we're waiting for someone to, oh, here we go. There's a hand raised. Jeremiah.
Oh, hi, how's it going?
Kia ora.
Good.
Builder. I have a question. I'm potentially filming with an audience that hasn't, or community that hasn't really been seen too much cinematically. And so what I'm worried about is that, you know, people might not see the worth in that community because they're just not known. And it's a Pacific Island community, and a country it's quite hard to get into. And politically, there's been, you know, a whole lot of unrest and violence. And so my main fear is that people are just going to be like, either they've heard about it and they're going to shy away from it, or they're just not really interested because they just don't know about this people. So for me, it's trying to create an excitement for a community that's just not known at all. Yeah.
For me, that's kind of the exciting part in a way, is that they haven't, you know, that people don't know about them. So that's actually a positive. The story hasn't been told before. The other thing is sort of saying, what are the universal themes or truths that you think you could explore in this community that could resonate with an audience? You know, like you think about, I don't know if you saw that documentary, All That Breathes, which did, you know, really well last year. Was it last year or this year? Last year. Yeah. And so, you know, that was a documentary about a couple of brothers in India who were healing birds that were falling from the sky. You know, that's not a documentary about, for example, Ahi. We have a film about Israel Adesanya, the MMA fighter. Immediately you go, okay, I know who he is. Okay, that's a different proposition. It doesn't mean that one story isn't going to be more interesting to the viewer than the other. It does mean you have a few hurdles and you have a few things to come over, but I think it's about saying, hey, this hasn't been told before. And the reason that I think it should be told is X, Y, and Z. And I think this is what's going to resonate with people. You know, when you watch All That Breathes, the thing that resonates with you is family and compassion and these beautiful people who have got this drive to actually help without someone making them do that. And so, yeah, that's what I think.
Cool. Thank you.
No worries.
Yep. Thanks. Anyone else would like to ask a question at this point? Here, Izzy.
Hi. I was wondering if so one of the things I've been trying very hard is to see if there are materials, whether it's for Dog Edge or other forums, where I could see people's pitch materials. And while it's easy to find a list of films that did well at different pitch forums, I found it very hard. Other than right now, I literally am tracking people like at the D Word or at the A-Dog to see if anyone would be willing to share. And I wanted to see if you might be aware of places, sources where we could see people's pitch decks and materials, or even if it's a video of their pitch, because that could be helpful instead of trying to second guess from watching the actual final documentary and how did they pitch it.
I think it'd be really hard for you to get your hands on, and Claire, you might have more of an insight into this than me, but like, you know, because it's such a commercially sensitive thing, it's something that I would never, it's something that I would never pass on a pitch deck that a filmmaker has sent me, because that's for them to do. So I would, if I was you, if there are people who you know who have successfully pitched, is ask them and just be like, it will be confidential and I will keep it, or track them down, meet them in person and say, hey, I just need some help, because artists love to collaborate, and so often, you know, it's probably that's the best way. But I don't know, Claire, do you know of any? It's really tricky because
Yeah, it's a hard one. You know, I think that if you're a member of the D Word, you might want to put out a feeler and say, is anybody would like to share? You know, and it can be proprietary, and you can say, promise not to share it, but you can put out a call. And also, you know, Realscreen does a is it Realscreen or is it in Realscreen does a whole kind of summary of the pitches at ITFA and at Hot Docs. and just talks
Right.
about them. You know, they don't show the pitch, but they talk about what the gatekeeper commissioning editor reactions are to the pitch, and you could read about them there. And if there's something that catches your eye, or if you spot something that might be interesting, then you can contact the filmmaker, use the D word or the IDA documentary to contact them. But it is kind of hard because, as Courtney says, it's a little proprietary and it's also commercial, and sometimes there are some security issues involved. But yeah, I'm sure you can find somebody who's willing to do that.
Yeah.
I did. I have been looking for folks at D Word, and there have been some folks that have been very kind. But I'm thinking, when I applied for the NEH grant, one of the things that was very nice is you could look at past. They do post.
They share the
online.
proposals.
Yeah, and I have found that so helpful. And so you're right. I've been looking for folks individually, but I'm like, oh, if someone could share it, I'm sure all my fellow pitch, sort of folks would love to see it too. So, but thank you. I will keep persisting in finding individuals to share.
So Izzy, one of the things that we will be doing is sharing resources with the pitch finalists, which will talk about the type of topics, what you need to do to prepare yourself for the pitch, examples of good pitch trailers, examples of pitch decks. So that will be forthcoming as well. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Was there another person with a hand up, Bill?
There are 2 people.
Okay, 2 people. Yes. And the first person is Ina.
Hi everyone. I wanted to ask because I feel a lot of the time when we talk about a topic that is not known to everybody, we spend quite a lot of time explaining history or circumstances, and especially when it comes to history, I feel like I might lose people along the way when I try to explain complex political situations, but at the same time it's necessary to explain it, because then the complexity of the story or of the subject might not come out. But how do you navigate not to delve too much into history to make it sort of for people to lose interest along the way before they get to the actual story?
I think I know this sounds like it'll be quite difficult, but try and not start with that. Try and start with kind of what I was saying to Jeremiah about the universal truths and the characters and what the actual, almost like short log line précis will be of the emotional journey that the viewer is going to be taken on. Because if you do start to get too into the history and those sorts of things from the get-go, and it will start to feel like, is this just an educational resource? It might be, so apologies if it is, but just I think it's really about starting with the hook. What is the thing that is going to make someone go, oh, I want to watch that? Because that's the thing, we're all just viewers as well. Like I love movies. That's why I do this, So like I want to half the reason why we sign on to things is because I'm like, yeah, I want to see this. I'm going to see this. So it's just like, what's the thing that's going to make someone want to see it, and then get into that context. I know, again, you'll be really close to the project, and for you, the granular details are going to be so important. But I can guarantee you, they potentially won't be as important in the very beginning. And I would practice with people. I'd practice with friends. Like practicing is really, really helpful. People who friends or acquaintances that don't know about the project, just to see if you can hook them in from the get-go.
Yeah, that's perfect. I think that the testing is really important, because you're going to see if your storytelling, whatever style you're going to use to tell your story, is going to be effective or not. And if there are big details that are missing, I think your test audience is going to say, well, I don't quite understand about this. And that's maybe something you can include later. That's a great question, though.
Yeah, it's a very good question. Yeah.
And I'll just add to that as well, is that every pitch is a practice for your next pitch. You're going to learn from it. Every time you
Yeah.
get feedback from the people that are listening to you, you're going to take that feedback and you're going to finesse the next time you pitch. So, I don't think we can ever end up with the perfect pitch from the very beginning. Our pitch just continues to improve as we gather the momentum from the feedback received. Kim, you had a question?
Thank you.
How important is the title?
Yeah, it becomes extremely important at the marketing
Yeah.
and distribution phase. And I have worked on films where we've changed it just before. It is definitely important. I think it is definitely important in that it sticks in your mind. It sticks in my mind. Even, there's been a few things that sometimes when it sounds too much like another documentary or too much like another film, I forget the title because I get it mixed up with that other one. Because it's, again, remembering that they aren't as ingrained in the project as you are, and they haven't been hearing that title over and over again. So it's just about being able to, that stickability of it. But it is something that if someone comes on board to help, and if I came on board, it's something that if we were like, actually, we think we should change the title, that happens. But at the pitch process, it's just about making sure it's memorable, I think.
Cool. Thank you.
No worries.
We've got one more, and I think that should be the last one
Yep.
for today. Yeah.
For this part. Yeah. Saurav.
Kia ora.
Hi, Saurav.
Hi, Alex and Claire. Good to see you again. And hi, Courtney. Hello, all. I have a question. Being in the, can you hear me?
Yes.
Let's say being in the pre-production or in late development stage, if something is still missing, something very important for your treatment or as the visual, I'll give you an example of the film I'm working on where mixed media animation and puppetry combined together plays a major role in the treatment. But it takes time and it takes a lot of money to make those animations. So how do you strategize? Because one feels a bit weak because I don't have this. How can I explain verbally or by text? Because it is the visuals which speak. So being in the early stage, how do you place yourself? What should be your strategy? That's my question.
If it's something that, if it's something that is visual that's missing, if there's any comparative visuals that you can draw upon from other films, then that's quite helpful. Or this is interesting. I've got a friend who's a filmmaker and he's really started using AI a lot in his pitch documents, Midjourney in particular. And he was sharing some things with me where he'd given it Midjourney prompts. And it was really incredible. And it really, for me, gave me like a real sense of the visual style of what he was going for. I think everyone's very scared of AI as filmmakers and where it's going to take our industry. But I think anyone that can utilize it at this stage to their best ability and not be too scared because it's coming, the pitch process is the key time to do it. So it is very tricky because I hear what you're saying, that it's going to be an integral part to what you're developing, and you're just going to have to either figure out a very succinct way of explaining it, but I think it sounds like it's a very visual part. So I think any comparisons that you can draw upon from other films, any sketches that you can just pay someone to do, and it might actually be really worth it to get it across. Yeah, I hope that's helpful.
And Saurav, do you have you picked an animator yet, or do you have an animator that you can give some examples of what the past work that you could show?
Yes, Claire, we have started with animation artists in India who are really good. And we have, because it's a long process of first you have to have the script, then you have to have the animation artist to draw the figures and the characters, then you go for the storyboarding, then you go for the animatics, and then you execute it in 2D or 3D. It's a long process. So we have initiated the process with very humble support from ITFA Varta Development Fund. But definitely, I realized that this is an expensive field where to engage professionals, you need to have more support and you need time. It's very time consuming. But definitely, I have this very crude storyboards or the script. Or also, we have tried, Courtney, the AI generated like Midway, and which are close, but we need to modify those and really put into our treatment, which is really unique. It's not tailor made, which is because we are using puppets also, which is not available easily in the other films or in the AI. I mean, sometimes the AI give very, very strange effects when you put those commands. Um, it's in that stage. Yes, Claire, we have begun the process. We have initiated the process. Definitely, each day it is progressing, but
I think it would be
yet.
good, you can give examples of that animator's past work to give an idea visually of what their work is like. And so that will give people a clue of what it might look like finished, even though you're in this just a storyboarding process. Combined with the storyboards and their past work, it might be helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank
sure.
you.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. Look, guys, we were going to have a break now, and Courtney's going to say goodbye to us shortly. Just wanted to say that whole question about title. I'll give you an example. I'm working on a project right now, and the title of my project is "I Thought Jesus Was Korean." And I can tell you that every time we pitch that, everyone remembers that. The Korean God, the Korean Jesus, they always think about that because it's memorable. Sometimes you just need to have that catchy title that people will hang on to, and they're curious, they're inquisitive about what it means, but you can always change the title later because you will do that anyway if the story changes. So thank you so much, Courtney. Maybe just to finish off.
There's one thing actually that I would love to mention that I haven't mentioned. And it's specifically about the distribution landscape and what it is like now for documentaries, is that be aware of it, and be aware of where people are watching documentaries and where their eyeballs are, and on a specific Australian and New Zealand level. This is going to sound very somber, but it hasn't recovered post-COVID in theatres, and it probably has changed forever. And I think that be aware of that when you are going to distributors, because I get a lot of people going, oh, no, this is going to be just like that film. And I'm like, that film was released 15 years ago. There's a lot of that. Oh, but we'll make it as big as, I'm like, it is completely different. We are in a completely different time right now. So showing that you are aware of those difficulties and challenges and saying why your film could be the standout is really important. And then also just knowing who you're pitching to and what their kaupapa is and what their vibe is really important. We, for example, we do take on some films that if it doesn't have the requirements from Screen Australia or the Film Commission to be shown in a theatre, we will be still the distributors for Australia and New Zealand. And then for the next, we might have a license period for 15 years. And what we will be is essentially your sales agents on this side of the world. We'll make sure it gets on the streamers. We'll get, it could end up having to skip the theatrical process. Because we are still, every film that goes to the theatres that we release, we have to then continue its life. And so we're still talking to the Netflixes and the Amazons and those sorts of things. Obviously, the Australian and New Zealand landscape when it comes to the funding bodies is such that you have that theatrical requirement for now with some things. Where that will be in the future, who knows? But I just think being really realistic about where the distribution, because more documentaries have been made than ever before, but the eyeballs are in many, many different places. So just I hope that wasn't too somber to end on. I think it's more just like, no, don't be too naive. Because when someone's too naive and they tell me that their film's going to make the same amount of money as, a film that, was released 10 years ago, then I know I'm going to have an uphill battle to try and say to them, I'm sorry, team, it's just that's not the industry right now.
Thank you, Courtney. I think that the key words for me, taking from what you just said, is research.
Yeah.
Do your research, and the second one is be realistic. And I think those are really important points to remember. Now, thank you so much. Hope you have a nice rest of the day. We're going to take a 10-minute break, toilet break, coffee break, whatever it is that you need to do, and then we'll come back. So thanks again. See you soon.
Bye, Courtney.
Okay,
Nice
Jane.
to meet you.
Lovely
Thank
to
you,
meet you.
Courtney.
Hi, everyone. I hope we're all back. Okay. I thought I'd start off with this part of the session by maybe starting back to using the issue that was raised by Courtney about research and being prepared, the comps and everything else like that. Yeah, Claire, I trust you have seen great projects, have done a lot of great research, but I'm sure you've also seen a lot of projects that have not been researched and that have fallen flat. Shall we have a quick chat about, the importance of research and the type of research that pitch project filmmakers should be looking at doing?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's great to be able to, um, to see. You might be doing a project that has been done before, but I think the important question is like, well, what makes this project unique? Like if you want to do a documentary about baseball, it's like there have been a lot of documentaries about baseball. What makes this unique? Maybe it's about a certain player. Maybe it's about, a certain period in history in baseball. But you have to research and find out that your film hasn't been done before. Or if you think you have a unique subject or a unique take on it, just make sure that it hasn't been done before. And you can do this pretty easily. Just to look. There've been so many times I've been pitched a project where it's like, well, do you realize that there's been other films about the Mongolian throat singers, And it's like, well, no, they don't know, but you could find out. You could just do a Google search. This was like pre-internet, so now you can just do a Google search. But yeah, not only research the subject, but also research the entity that you're going to pitch to. Now, sometimes you don't know who it is. It could be anybody. It could be your Uber driver, or it could be somebody. But if you're going to do a formal pitch and you know who the commissioning editors are, the gatekeepers are, the platforms are, just find out, well, what is their editorial line? What are they looking for? There's been so much turbulence in our industry lately that people are coming and going. So there are a lot of different shifts of personnel. It's important to know, well, how they changed their mandate. They've just kind of eliminated the documentary strand at CNN, the feature documentary strand of CNN right now, and they don't have plans to replace it. So you don't need to go, pitch to somebody at CNN. There's nobody there. But it's important to know, like, the changing landscape of the industry and who you're pitching to and what they're interested in.
Yeah, thanks for that. I think that's really critical because you need to know who you're pitching to, particularly when you are pitching in a formal way. You need to know what have they commissioned, what are they looking for, how has that particular film or that particular type of film done for them, because that's going to help you in terms of how you're going to be able to sell your idea to them. So I think that's really important. That it'll be very lazy if you go into a pitch process without trying to find out more about the people that are the decision makers, because then you can tailor make your presentation in such a way that is actually meaningful for them. When we're looking at a pitch deck, Claire, I'm going to just share anyway some of the different things that people need to think about in terms of what a pitch deck should be. I'll just put it into the chat. But maybe I'll just go through them, and then maybe Claire, if there's anything you want to pick up in terms of a pitch deck, or what else could be in a pitch deck, or how certain things should be better interpreted in a pitch deck, please add in. by and large, when you do a pitch deck, it's really important to have a title page with a film title, the filmmaker's name, and contact information. Provide a log line or a one-sentence summary of the story, synopsis, and a summary of the story itself. Think about what it is that you're pitching, what genre, what length, what format, because people like to know from the very beginning, is this a theatrical length documentary? Is this going to be a TV series? They need to know what it is that you're thinking that you're pitching, because then they know how it fits in with what it is that they're looking for. Make sure that there's a treatment or a detailed outline of how the story is going to go. Talk about the characters that you are choosing, and if you've got consents for them. It's useful in terms of comms, as we talked about earlier. Are there visual elements that you are able to provide as a way for us to do a comparison as to how you're going to make your film? The images, mood boards, concept art, target audiences and distribution plan, budget breakdown and a financing plan, a filmmaker's biography, and any previous work, production timeline and schedule, and most importantly, a lot of people actually go through a whole pitch without saying what it is that they're looking for, and that is so critical, to be able to tell people, I'm looking for production funding, I'm looking for money, I'm looking for festival interest, I'm
looking for a producer,
a sales agent, whatever it is, but it's just good to be able to make sure that it's very clear, and contact information for the filmmaker, the production team. Is there anything you'd like to add to that, Claire?
No, I think that covers it really well. I mean, some basic things that this is kind of funny, but sometimes I've noticed when people are pitching me just verbally without the treatment, they're so excited that they forget to introduce themselves.
Oh, yes.
And they just launch into the pitch, and suddenly it's sort of like, I saw a pitch from he was a guy who had an earring, and I think he had a streak in his hair. It was blue, but I don't remember his name, and he didn't tell me what his name was. So I remember the project, but I don't remember the person. So I think it makes sense to just take time, introduce yourself, give your name, or have something written down so that they'll remember you. And then the next time you can, enhance the relationship. Just, take your time, introduce yourself, and then you can go into all those elements of the pitch.
Yes.
If you're doing a face-to-face pitch, just introduce yourself. Yeah.
And I think that just what Claire was saying, in the old days, you used to get this a proposal. It's all written. It's huge. It's heavy going through to read it. And these days, it's tend to be very visual. But sometimes it's not enough information. There's a happy medium between the two. And I think it's really important to think to yourself, what's the best way in which we can get that information? You're pitching it. If you're pitching it verbally, what your pitch deck should do is provide some additional information that's going to add to what they have listened to, so they can understand exactly what the project is. And I think that, for me, I tend to use a very simple method of just using a PDF from a PowerPoint presentation, and I would just provide that as my pitch deck. Simplest way for me to do it. But do think about how it looks, because it needs to be attractive, because we get Claire, how many pitches or pitch decks would you get when you were commissioning in any one week?
Oh, well, thankfully not that many anymore, but in the heyday, it would just come from everywhere. Maybe it'd be like 50 a week. And in the days of VHS, I'd have stacks or DVDs like up to my eyeballs. Now everything's online, so it's great. But I just want to say one thing, though, and that's just my personal preferences. I don't mind looking at footage. I kind of prefer it rather than reading, because I just think the proof is in the pudding. So if someone says, here is a sample, it's 10 minutes, but I do have other footage, it's a little longer, but you're welcome to it. It's on Vimeo. I don't mind watching that. In fact, I prefer that. And then if I have questions, I can follow up. So I think that's true for most people who look at proposals, but I'll just speak for myself and say, if you have more material, send it on. That's fine.
So moving on to the teaser. I mean, when someone makes a teaser or some audiovisual material that they can show you, what would be the best type of material to actually present it to you?
Yeah, well, a lot of people are kind of they get kind of stuck between, is it a trailer, is it a teaser, is it promotional? I say, try to identify it as specifically as you can. For example, if it's a teaser, meaning that it's going to make you want to go and see the film, it's promotional, say it's a teaser. But if it's an assemblage of scenes, which is something I'd rather see, just say, this is not chronological, this is just an assembly of scenes. Or if it's just pre-research footage, I haven't got on my principal photography yet, but I've just, done a recce or two and I've captured some images, just say that. But just be as precise as possible, because you don't want the person to think, oh, well, this is a finished film, or this is what the film is going to look like. But, don't go overboard either. But as I said, like, for instance, you have a sample of, let's say, 5 minutes of selected scenes, and then you say, I have some raw, unedited footage that I could show you as well if you're interested in it. That's fine too, but just identify it.
What about previous work? I mean, is that important for you to be able to see what a director may have previously done?
Yeah, I think if it seems like the level, the people who are pitching are pretty experienced here at the Dock Edge Pitch. But if you're an emerging producer and maybe this is your first feature, I think previous work is really helpful to kind of get an idea. If you don't have a lot of visual material for the present project, it's good to see the previous work. Now, if you're already established or you've made a lot of films, maybe it's not as important, but I always like to look at previous work. I just like to see what people have done before, even if it's another genre, like if it's a dramatic film or student film. I think it's helpful.
At a live event where a filmmaker's pitching, do you recommend that they actually provide every decision maker with a copy of a pitch deck, or would you just say, give them a business card, get their business card, send them an email with a PDF of the pitch deck?
Well, I think it's just really hard to keep track of like physical materials when you're at these events. So I always prefer to just get a link or have it follow up in an email where you can, if I don't remember to take every card with me, if somebody like follows up and said, we met at Hot Dogs or we met at Dock Edge, and I just like to follow up. Here's a PDF of my pitch deck, and here's a Vimeo link to my sample. I think that's just easier to keep track of. And again, I think it's great to just keep, I think people are inundated with materials, and you may think you're bugging, beating a dead horse by bugging these people, but just think of all the volume. And it's kind of a favor for people to say, just remind you and just be nice about it. You don't have to be harassing people, but just be nice and say, I just want to remind you of our meeting and I want to follow up and keep in touch. Remember, it's a relationship. I used to call it was like dating, except, no romance necessarily. Maybe there's some, but, it's like dating, it's sort of like, you kind of know at the first date, is it going to work or not, And then if you think it is, then you just keep on meeting and you go to these events and, maybe it'll be a relationship and a partnership that might last, maybe at the maximum 10 years, hopefully sooner than that, and then continue on for other films.
I have to say that over the number of years I've been involved with markets, I haven't found a single decision maker that wasn't generous enough to say, it's not really mine, but I suggest that this might be something that you should contact and they might name a few other people, or they might suggest other places that you can go to, because people are very generous in trying to help filmmakers get their projects up. So that could be a question as well. If someone says to you, this is not really, my cup of tea, maybe you
Right.
can ask them, to get some feedback, and, who do you think maybe, I should be pitching to?
Yeah,
Try to
exactly.
engage in that conversation.
And also because these are people who know the industry. So, it's like there's a community of programmers in the film festivals, as you know, Alex, it's like they talk to each other, right? It's not like you work in isolation, but they talk to each other. So the same thing with commissioning editors, they know each other. It's kind of a little family. It may have changed now recently because there's so much change and disruption, but, people do talk to each other and they know the industry. So I think you're right. I think it's a good resource to say, well, if it doesn't fit for you, do you recommend anybody I could go to?
On the issue of comms, and we've talked about making sure that the comms are appropriate. Part of that is actually looking at, if someone were to suggest to you, you can make this amount of money because that film's done this box office is comparable. But the comparison is not just with the film, but comparison needs to be made with your budget. Because you can't be suggesting a $3 million documentary and only have a $700,000 box office. So you need to think a lot about the comparison of what your projected box office might be, or audience numbers might be, as compared to what might be the actual budget that you're trying to achieve. But there are two ends of it, because I've seen in many instances with a lot of new and emerging filmmakers as well, is that they're always afraid. They're afraid to actually tell you exactly how much the film might cost, because any money is better than no money at all, and they just want to get their film out and up and running. So I'm just wondering whether you have some advice about the whole area of budgeting, because that is something that a lot of filmmakers, when they present their first pitch, and even not just the first pitch, I think every filmmaker, when they start putting together a budget, that's the thing that they worry about. Is it too much? Is it too little? What is the amount that would make it worthwhile?
Yeah, that's such a complicated question because budgets are so, they're like water. It's tough because when I worked at ITVS, we had a policy of not paying for deferrals, meaning that we would only pay from the production to delivery. So any of the work you had done before, whether it was shooting or staff or even paying yourself as a filmmaker, as a producer, that was in the past. So it was only from this point on, from contract to delivery. And that was tough for producers because they had spent maybe years with trying to catch up, and no deferrals meant that all the crew they got, for free, and all the pay that they never got paid, they couldn't recoup that. On the other hand, they would find ways to kind of, I won't say pad, but actually they would pad their budgets to be able to recoup some of those deferred fees. And for another entity, like let's say HBO, that didn't matter at all. The contract fee had nothing to do with it had to do with the whole life of the project, meaning they could ask for a lot more money. It didn't have to be as precise as that ITVS contract. So I think it depends on who you're pitching to and who you're contracting with. And, to be realistic as possible vis-a-vis who you will be contracting with, I think is fair. So like if you're going to be able to go to an entity like Netflix and say, well, I would want this much for the contracting, that's going to pay for production costs as well as those past fees. That's fair. But if you're going to go to a public funder, like in the US, like ITVS or some of the strands, they might want to just pay you a fixed production fee. So I've seen budgets that vary so much from 2 million, and then the lowest point is like 400,000 to 2 million. There's so much flexibility in the budget. I don't know. What do you think?
I think it's so much also dependent on where or where the film is based and who's making the film. Like I do think that when you're coming from a region or a country that is not as familiar, doesn't have as much of an advanced documentary industry, that sometimes the budgets are a little bit low. And I think that they're low and they're not really representative of what I consider to be a living wage or what a project should be. And I think that that's the difficulty, because if you are not familiar with what a budget should be, you just basically perhaps you tend to. I think the starting point is always tending to be favoring a lower budget than a higher budget. But I've also been at markets where a particular budget would be explored, and the filmmaker will say, well, I'm from Bangladesh and I only need $150,000 to make this feature film. And then I've seen funders and broadcasters say, but you can't make a film for $150,000. How can you do that? And that's that quandary that I think that some of the newer filmmakers and some of the filmmakers from countries that don't have that advanced documentary industry will face. And but in your mind at the moment, just say an independent documentary coming out of the US right now or from the UK, what do you think would be just a standard independent documentary? We're not talking about major archives, we're not talking about a lot of travel. It may be a more internal story from within the particular region. What do you think an average budget might be these days?
With something without a lot of extra fees, without a lot of rights or copyrighted materials or travel, probably between like 600 to 800,000 US dollars for a feature, and maybe less for an hour. I think that's on the low end.
Yes.
Because but with just salaries and and some fees for post, that's what I don't know. I think that's about right. But I think it's interesting, when I was doing international, there were other countries where like for instance in Israel, for example, they did things pretty cheaply, although once their films were in co-production or they were looking for international distribution, then the budgets kind of shot up. They could do the work really cheaply in Israel, right? But then on the other hand, for any kind of distribution, or if they had a co-pro, let's say with France or Canada, then those costs went up because it costs more in those countries. But then they could also get support from those countries if they were a co-pro from those governments. So there was a trade-off there.
Would you suggest that they provide for an impact budget as well?
I've seen that probably in 50% of the proposals that I see. I can think it depends on the subject matter and what kind of impact they want. Do they want to just do kind of an impact engagement, kind of a series of events, or do they want to hire an impact producer? Do they want to staff it? Is it going to be a really long tail impact campaign, or is it going to be just something that's maybe timely, like for elections or something political? So I think it depends. But if it's appropriate, yeah, definitely. People are looking a lot for impact producers. It's really difficult because there are not that many people who have good experience, so they're very much in demand. And also, it's not standardized how much you pay. It sort of depends on how much work they have to do, right? Yeah.
Yes,
so
absolutely.
But I think if it's appropriate, yeah, definitely get an impact line in your budget. Also, it's good for the funder. I mean, it depends. Some funders don't give a hoot about impact, but if it's public media, I think they do.
Yes, I agree with that, and I agree with the fact that how much you pay an impact producer and how much your impact budget is quite varying at the moment. There's no real definite standard.
Right.
But it's really important if your film needs to have impact outcomes that you actually start to look at what an impact budget and how you can bring an impact producer from the very early stage. Quite often it happens too late. It happens after the film finishes. Oh my God, we do need to do impact now. And then it's just scrambling, trying to find money and people to help out. And by that stage, most people said, but we've already funded you. And then you start needing to look at impact funders, and that's a totally different totally different ball game, really.
Yeah, but if you start off with knowing that you have an impact campaign, then you can actually target those funders at the development stage, which is actually where they want to come in for a lot of them. So that's a good time.
Yes, absolutely. If I were to ask you what some of the things that first-time pitchers or people that are pitching, some of the mistakes or some of the pitfalls that might happen to them, what would some of these be for you?
Oh, okay. Well, I got a big list. Well, that one thing, which is, it seems like a small thing, but just not introducing yourself, I think that's not really good. Another thing people do, and I really understand the reason for this, is that they tend to, in the more formal pitches, read their pitches instead of presenting their pitches. And, you have to understand that pitching is a performance. You really have to, it's storytelling, but it's also presenting the person as opposed to the thing. So when I see somebody reading a performance and not making eye contact or just, reading words, it's kind of, it's difficult. I know that if you have a certain subject and you have to be precise in the language, sometimes it's hard to do ad lib or to speak off the cuff. On the other hand, I have seen some people who read really well, but they're doing it in a way where they're presenting as well as reading, They're looking up from the text, they're making eye contact with the room. And I think that's important too. Another pitfall, I think, is when, I think we touched a little bit about this with Courtney, and that's that when there's a controversial subject or something that needs to be flagged that people don't, and I'm talking more about things like the security for the participants, or if things are, sometimes there are volatile conditions in some countries, like Ukraine, or you have to really protect the participants, And, I think in some pitches, it's important to do that, and there are ways of doing that. They put a moratorium on the pitch so that they make sure that it's not talked about the press. No press is involved. But sometimes people have to be really aware of that, or the security of the participants might be in jeopardy, things like that. Let's see, what other pitfalls? One thing is that, and I really understand the enthusiasm that people have with pitching, and also the fatigue. If you're someplace and you have to pitch 30 times, to different people, oh my God, it's very difficult. And then think about the other end of somebody being pitched to 30 times, which is my position, when I was doing that. But on the other hand, I think it's good to just, just slow down. Sometimes I think people just want to get it over with, and they're just talking. And also not only slow down, but listen to feedback. Don't just, say, I did it. Okay, now I can go. Listen to the feedback. You don't have to take everyone's advice. They might not like the project and be really, honest with you about it, but you don't have to take their advice, but you can listen to them and just give them a little time. Give yourself time as a person when you're trying to speak. It's okay, because as I said, you're probably going to meet the person. If your pitch is successful, you're probably going to meet the person again and again. It's not just a one-shot thing for most people, right? So there is time, and you don't have to pack it all in 7 minutes and then go, whew, bye, I'm out of here. Listen to what the person has to say. It might be important just to take a breath, meditate, and just take a moment and just stop. Don't apologize for anything. You know, people aren't there to like, I'm sorry, I'm so disorganized and I'm in a hurry. It's like, you know, just be there with the person and take your time.
Thank you. That's great. I think that speed is actually a really critical thing. People tend to speak very fast, and you need to take your time. You need to enjoy the experience, because the more you enjoy the experience, the more the people that are listening to you will enjoy the experience as well. And I always say, you know, unless you pitch to the same person 10 times, most people will not remember everything, or they won't know your story. So it's up to you to tell the story. If you make a mistake, most people don't know that you've made a mistake. Just keep going. Be confident. Practice is really important for me, because I think that quite often people don't practice enough, and they think, oh, okay, I can wing it because I kind of know it. And so, yeah, I'll come to tomorrow morning and I'll pitch it. But a pitch, as Claire has said, is a dramatic moment. It's an opportunity for you to bring people on your journey. So you need to be able to demonstrate your passion, your commitment, and that's actually by being prepared for it and being rehearsed for it, and that's really important. The other thing that I think is also really important for people to remember in pitching is that you should be rehearsing this across a whole lot of people, your best friends, your family, your colleagues. You know, ask them, did you get my story? You know, what did you get out of it? What was missing? You know, the more you pitch to different people, the more likely you are to start to be able to see some of the things that are holes perhaps in the way you present it. In the pitch process for DocEdge Pitch, you have 7 minutes to prepare to pitch. So that would include both your oral presentation as well as your visual presentation. Usually people divide it up into 3 and 4, but that's really up to you, because you've got 7 minutes. Some people don't have a lot of material in terms of visual, so they tend to speak a bit more. You can decide whether or not you're going to start off with verbal, and then you're going to go on to showing something that's audio and come back and finish it off. Or you might decide that you have a different way in which you want to order things. But think about how you can get your story and your presentation right, so that it is convincing, it's compelling, it's exciting, it's fun. You know, make it fun. And I think that's a big part of it, because you can see when people don't have fun, you know, it actually does, you know, it really does dampen the experience for the people that are listening. And through the process that we're going to have with DocEdge Pitch, you're going to have mentors. We've selected mentors for your projects. These people are people that we have given them information about your project. They're going to talk to you, work with you in small groups to be able to understand how you intend to present it, what materials you have, to give you advice. Listen to them. At the same time, ask for help. They're there to help you. So that's the most important thing is use the opportunity to have a fulfilling and a satisfying experience with your mentor. We have a couple more sessions that are going to talk about presentation. We're going to talk about your teaser, your trailer, your whatever audiovisual material you're going to utilize, and then you're going to have the opportunity to work with your mentors, and then we're going to do rehearsals, and then we're going to go into the pitch itself. All the way through, the pitch team at DocEdge will be there to help you to be able to answer your questions, but we'll try to provide you with as many resources as possible. I'm going to let the last 5 or 6 minutes open up to questions. So anyone else with questions? I mean, I think that both Claire and myself, or you want to share something that you learned, or you want to share something from your experience of having pitched, and you want to share with the rest of the participants, please do. I'll just keep talking until someone puts up their hand. Also, I would encourage you to go to as many opportunities to listen to people pitch. Yeah. Because the more you listen to people pitch, the more you get a sense of what it is that makes a good presentation. And listening to decision makers give feedback will give you an opportunity to listen to what it is that people are picking up and what it is that they're getting excited about, and you can start to analyze as to why. So, attend as many pitch events as possible, watch as many pitch events as possible. There is someone who, Susan. I think your mic. Yeah.
Oh, you missed what I said. It was great, but I actually just wanted to say thank you. I've written so many notes. Like I've really found this to be a valuable session. So really, that's. I don't have a question. I'm just thanking you for your time. Like it was really valuable.
Oh, good. Well, good luck on your pitch.
Thanks on my performance. I've written lots of notes on that. That's all really.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
I just did a training in Niger in Africa, where I worked with a lot of young people, and it was their first pitch. And we had a filmmaker there, though, that said, pitching is seduction. It's basically just.
I liked what you said about dating. Yeah, that was good.
It's just like the dating thing, it's seduction. It's sort of like, just have fun with it, and, just pretend that, you're just trying to seduce people. You're trying to get them into your world, and then, and forget about yourself for a minute and just try to concentrate on getting them into your world and getting them into your film.
Beautiful. And if you're already in love with your story, then
yeah, the love is going to extend,
Thank you.
Claire, I was just wondering, I noticed some of the pitches involve people covering a story about a particular character. And sometimes the question I get asked is, should I bring the character along to the pitch? Should the character be there so the character can actually be someone that the decision makers can see and they can get excited by? What do you think?
I think it depends on what the role is of the character. Like if it's a celebrity or a famous person, then of course that's great. It's like, oh, I have, Christiane Amanpour is going to be here, to be in the pitch. She's in the film. But if it's just a character, then I think that the proof of the pudding is on the footage. If the character comes alive in the film, then that's good enough. But then if it's a person of note or a celebrity or somebody who, maybe it's the, I don't know, somebody, I think it's good to have the pitch. But I think if you have such limited time, 7 minutes, you should just try to tell the story and use that time for that.
If you have a producer and a director that's part of a team or you have two of them available for the pitch, would you divide up the pitch between the two of them, or would you prefer to see just one person speak?
I think normally the director really gives the vision, the creative vision of the film and talks about the film. And then the producer will talk about the structural elements or the financing, because the producer is like basically the engineer of the train, and the director is somebody who's like designing the train or how it's going to move. So usually I see the director speaking first, and then the producer will kind of finish up, or the co-producers or the co-production entities. Let's say you have, a financer or a co-producer at the end to wrap it up and give you the hard, operational facts.
So in other words, if you got a co-producer or perhaps even someone like a particular, maybe a sales agent or a distributor that says, I really believe in this project, I'm happy to stand up there to endorse it, to get more people excited. That's actually worthwhile, right?
Yeah, like for instance, if Courtney came on at the end and said, oh yeah, Ahi Films is behind this film, we really want to support the project and we're committed to it, that would be a really great, stamp of approval for the film.
And with your background, having worked at ITVS, is there a difference between pitching something that's for TV and something that's being pitched as a theatrical feature? Is there any difference in the process, or what should be covered?
Well, there was then, because for TV we had set time restrictions for duration, so we were really just interested in hours. Although we were able to program features in a 90-minute or 2-hour slot, but it was rare. We were looking for the hours, so we preferred the hours. And for PBS, it was 5640 in terms of the duration. So
Yeah.
that was a difference. And also the title was more important for television. Like it's very hard to have a title like All That Breathes, although I love that title. But it's kind of hard to know. It's about, people in India who rescue birds by the title, right? So the poetic titles didn't work that well on television, and they often were changed for television. But I think for theatrical and film, it's fine. Now with platforms, duration isn't an issue. Like on Netflix, your film can be 40 minutes or 4 hours. It doesn't matter. I don't think it's such an issue anymore.
We have one project that's actually a series. Is there something that you would like to recommend if a person was pitching a series?
Only that, sometimes people don't quite know if it's going to be maybe it'll be a feature and a series and a television hour, or, I think it's okay to be vague, but if it's definitely going to be a series with multiple episodes and, you're really committed to that format, I think it's good to say that at the get-go.
Yeah. I guess the other side of it is that you could potentially say that I'm pitching a feature, but I'm happy to reversion it into a TV hour to be able to indicate that you are open to the opportunity to actually work across different platforms and genres.
Mm-hmm. And lengths, and be flexible in it, because things might change, suddenly, I was working with this guy on a project. He definitely wanted to make it a series at the beginning. And then we went to some Academy Oscar event where all these feature filmmakers were profiled, and suddenly his series turned into a feature. It's like, okay.
Yes, they do. Yeah. Anyway, are there any other questions from anyone? Otherwise, we're coming to a point where we should actually finish today's session, and thank Claire for all the support and goodwill that she's shown today. I think we're all pretty good. Claire, thank you so much.
Oh, you're quite welcome. This was so much fun.
And I just want to say to everyone, just remember that Claire is actually a consultant. And if you decide at some point that you wanted to maybe get hold of Claire and maybe talk to Claire if she can come on board or help you or consult on something for you, you can always reach out to Belle or myself, and we'll be quite happy to, connect you up, and you can see whether or not there's an opportunity for that collaboration to occur.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, please do. That would be great. And thanks for this opportunity. It was really a lot of fun, and good luck to everybody on your pitches. I wish you all the best and for the successful realization of all your films.
Thank you, Claire. Belle, I'll let you finish off, Belle.
Me? Oh,
yeah.
I'm not sure what to say. Thank you all for coming, and I'm gonna be passing on, all the details about next week's workshops. And if you have any questions, feel free to contact me. I know that I can be a little bit late with replying the emails, that my hands are just so full right now. Please be patient. I'll get back to you as soon as possible. I'm planning to make a group chat on WhatsApp where we all can easily connect. So yeah, maybe just kind of look out for that. And yeah, I'll see you again next week.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Okay,
Have a nice rest of the day or night wherever you are. Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Claire.
Bye.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.